Well, Rand Paul is considered possibly a presidential candidate. Is, dare I say, defending President Obama, at least supporting President Obama when it comes to what's going on in Iraq, opposite of Dick Cheney. What is going on, Trey Harden, ABC News correspondent? Is Rand Paul losing his mind? What's going on around here?
No, he's not losing his mind. I mean, when people, Dick Cheney, Rand Paul, anyone talk about this Iraq issue, I mean, you can find bits and pieces of what everyone's saying and say that it makes sense or agree with it. But it shouldn't be surprising that Dick Cheney says we should keep a force in there. I mean, he's personally vested in it. He's been personally vested in it since the late '80s. He also doesn't have to put his name on a ballot right now and worry about what the people say and he's not that he's ever worried about what the people think about him. But clearly we have no business putting military force back into Iraq right now, and we're not going to. I think if anything we've learned from this these last 10 years in Iraq or whatnot is that we're just not going to be successful nation building. It's one thing to fight the war on terror. It's another thing to try to build a nation. And I just don't believe it can be done in the Middle East these days. I think that there has to be some type of happy medium or balance there. I think what Rand Paul was saying is really what a lot of people are saying right now, which is, no, we've got no business going back in there. At the same time that there's really no good options. And as well, Republicans, I think, need to be careful about how they talk about this now. I mean, it's going to be difficult. They're going to want to talk about it and go after President Obama during this, but there's really not much that he or anyone can do at this point. I think some decisions will have to be made, whether we do strikes or whether we or what kind of intelligence we have on the ground there. But clearly, the options are limited. It's
a serious situation on lots of levels. So much so that we're starting to hear that Iran and the U.S. are actually on the same side, trying to go after ISIS. I mean, these guys. Nobody wants these guys in the region. Even the people who normally hate the U.S. are sort of looking to the U.S. for help in this situation.
Secretary Kerry or the Obama or anyone in the Obama administration to be collaborating with Iran right now. Again, I think we need to be very careful about how we engage going forward. I don't see and that is having very good, comprehensive intelligence, monitoring it closely, and where and when there are flare-ups or we have opportunities to take people out that are ultimately a risk to the United States, whether it's abroad or at home here, that we do so. And I just think that is there's a difference between being engaged in a country and fighting the war on terror. And I just think we need to keep our focus on fighting the war on terror. I think the American people are fine with that and supportive of that, and they expect that.
Is the Republican Party going through a fight within itself on foreign policy? Because you talk about Dick Cheney, you talk about the quote-unquote neocons, and then the Rand Pauls. Bush administration got elected by saying we don't nation build, and then spent the better part of their administration trying to rebuild Iraq. Is the Republican Party going through somewhat of a fight in this situation?
No, it's a good question. I mean, because if you look at, the President Bush's decision to go into Iraq, and then you look at what Rand Paul just said, I mean, you could make that deduction. But I think there's, the Republican Party is, everyone is on the same page as it relates to fighting the war on terror, recognizing the threat, being proactive about finding it around the world, and taking it out when necessary, and while at the same time and maintaining a strong military, not retreating from the world and hoping that the rest of the world will like us or respect us more if we do that, like this president does. I think that all Republicans are on the same page on that. Very much very different than what this president believes. I mean, this president believes that what it actually takes to fight the war on terror, he thinks is something that makes the U.S. look bad, and therefore he wants to be liked more by the world. So we've got to pull these drones out, or we got to pull special forces out, or we got to disengage from the world. It's just not reality. It's not reality for the world we live in. So I think Republicans are on the same page about fighting the war on terror, but clearly it is a difficult, it's clear that everyone's on the same page also about not sending another force back into Iraq. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of Republicans come out and agree with what Rand Paul is saying.
So President Obama said that he doesn't want troops going back in, but he has sort of left the door open a little bit for a bombing campaign. Do you think there would be support for some type of limited airstrike, strategic bombing to go after ISIS on a case-by-case basis?
Yes. I mean, again, I think we have to put everything in proper context. We fire missiles at terrorist camps regularly. I would say almost probably weekly or certainly monthly, and many that we probably don't even hear about or know about. It is part of our national security now. We do that in Afghanistan. We do that in many other parts of the world. I think we should treat this the same way. If there's an opportunity to take the leadership of ISIS out, or there's an opportunity where they are not kind of bunkering down around where citizens are in some of these cities, they're traveling and they're in the desert, whatnot, then yes, I think that there'll be a lot of support for that. But I think it can be done without, the president or anyone having to make a huge issue out of it, and can be done in a very, covert and intelligence gathering way.
That's Trey Harden, ABC News correspondent. Trey, be safe. Thanks for checking in. Talk to you next week.
You got it, buddy. Thank you.
628 here, Big 550.